what's ever going to happen to Monolake? Okay, so now what we're talking about is how we got from the landmark case of National Audubon Society versus Superior Court, which, by the way, just today, the latest poll, or latest, not poll, but I don't know, I guess it's a survey that's done, the results came out, the 10 most important environmental law cases of all time. Number 10 is the National Audubon Society versus Superior Court. Okay, can you guess what some of the others are? Chevron, Massachusetts versus EPA. You're like, God, who are these nerds who do this, right? But the environmental lawyers, people who are experts in the field, keep putting these together every so often. And National Audubon Society versus Superior Court is still in the top 10 most important environmental cases of all time. So, but again, the point here is that while it was a landmark case, it was an innovative use of the public trust doctrine for environmental conservation values, environmental conservation purposes. It still, by itself, did not achieve actual environmental conservation. So what did? Well, it's all these things working together: politics, public education, participation of values, the ecology and psychology of place, and collaborative problem solving. So let's talk about this. How did we get there? All of these things, basically the Monolake Committee got busy in a bunch of non-litigation work, trying to educate and engage the public, political activism, and generating support from politicians and various interest groups, and engaging in basically negotiation and collaborative problem solving, trying to get Los Angeles to work out a solution with them. So it's just some pictures that represent all that. So in terms of public education and engagement, one of the things that's important here is that this is a lesson in place-based environmentalism. One of the things, we've made a couple references to it before, but we'll continue to talk about it at different points, but the whole sort of field of environmental ethics. What are the principles that guide doing the right thing with respect to the environment? Well, one of the famous writings on environmental ethics, probably the most famous, is Aldo Leopold's The Sand County Almanac. Aldo Leopold was a conservation scientist, conservation expert, worked a lot with farmers, had a farm in Wisconsin, worked down in the National Forest in New Mexico, but he wrote this book, Sand County Almanac, in which he talked about the land ethic. And so he's particularly focused on our relationships with the land. And basically what he said is that it's all interconnected, and that when we act in a way that promotes the overall ecological health of the entire system, that's the right thing. Anything else is wrong. Okay, so that was Aldo Leopold's approach. And so here he is in the 1940s talking about ecology and systems-oriented approaches, all in the context of not some sort of wilderness experience, or people who are out, John Muir, anybody who's familiar with John Muir? John Muir was a famous environmentalist, big, long beard, out hiking in Yosemite, hiking in the Sierra Nevadas, and so forth. And some people were like, had a hard time relating to that, to John Muir. And if you're like a farmer in Nebraska, maybe John Muir doesn't really do a lot for you. Aldo Leopold, on the other hand, talking about how you could go about farming in Nebraska in a way that promotes the overall health of the land, the soils, the water, and the wildlife, and how it's all interconnected, and how humans are a part of that. That was the other thing. It's just to say, hey, humans are part of nature, and we don't, we can't just sort of set ourselves apart. And that when the system fails, we fail too. So that was influential. But what we found is that in terms of studying ecosystems and valuing ecology, people are much more likely to do it when they have a special connection to a place. Right? People are very place-based. Right? So when we talk about this, places that you've gone, things that you've experienced, right? But people are they get very connected to whether it's places you grew up, playing out in the woods or the creeks, places that special things happen to you, so on and so forth. You develop those connections, and so understanding the ecology of those places and understanding those meanings of those places to people increase human connectedness and increase ethical development. And a lot of studies show that. And so that was what was happening with Monolake. Right? They were studying the ecology of Monolake. They said, hey, this is a special place. But it became apparent to the Monolake Committee, to David Gaines and others, that they needed to connect the public to Monolake. And so one of the things they did was just simply try to raise awareness, and they had this sort of Save Monolake campaign. One of the things that was influential was a lot of bumper stickers. And anybody who drove in Los Angeles in the 1980s remembers the Monolake bumper stickers. They were everywhere. Everybody had them on their cars. And these were Save Monolake, Long Live Monolake, I Save Water for Monolake, Restore Monolake, and Monolake is for the birds. And I have a couple of these bumper stickers that I'm sure they've got to have reprinted them or whatever. But they're the old design, but you can get them from the Monolake Committee, and I have some of them in my office and so forth. So this was a big deal, right? I mean, in Los Angeles, they've got a lot of cars, a lot of bumpers, and you see this all over town. And so why? How did that happen? Well, one of the things is they started doing a lot of information and so forth, so they set up an information center and bookstore in Lee Vining, which is the town right on Monolake, and so people came and visit it, right? And so they had interpretive tours, outdoor programs, and so forth. Displays, they created a website, they had these traveling programs, informational programs that go all over the state, they had their slideshow, and so on and so forth, and they talked to various groups. But one of the most significant things that they did was they had programs for youth and children in Los Angeles. And some of it involved getting the kids from LA up to Monolake. Well, it's long ways, it's expensive, I mean, who has that kind of time? So they did a lot of outdoor education programs in Los Angeles. They basically wanted the kids to connect to nature around them and get thinking about this. But this was a lot of where the bumper stickers came from, because the kids would come home from school and they would get everybody in their family on board with saving Monolake, right? I mean, just imagine, what a brilliant strategy, right? I mean, if you were mobilizing school kids, right, all of a sudden, now this awareness builds and this support for Monolake builds. They set up a program in Los Angeles, and one of the things, and this gets to some of the issues that we've talked about, justice and cultural competence, they decided to focus quite a number of their programs on inner city residents in Los Angeles, to say, hey, there are people who are low income, And if saving Mono Lake is going to be mostly for well-off people who like to, get in their cars and drive up to, go to the area, up to the Sierra Nevada mountains and so forth, then that's not going to work, right? There's going to be disconnect. There's not going to be widespread support. It's going to be viewed as this elitist thing, and it's not going to build environmental ethic among everybody, right? And so they had a lot of programs with school kids in lower-income neighborhoods in Los Angeles. They had these water conservation assistance programs where they provided free low-flush toilets and free low-flow shower heads to people in these neighborhoods, because how are they going to afford? I mean, they're not going to have extra money sitting around to make those changes. They partnered with a variety of organizations in Watts and East Los Angeles, and Korean Youth and Community Center, and so on and so forth. And so those partnerships with neighborhood-based organizations, particularly in low-income neighborhoods of color, made a huge difference to them, and they started getting a lot of national and state media attention. Okay, let me see if that's on the next slide. Oops. Let me go back here. Okay, so let me stop with the national and state media attention. All right. So one of the main facts that should have told everybody that the Mono Lake Committee was ultimately going to win this was not that this battle to save Mono Lake appeared in National Geographic, Smithsonian Magazine, Time Magazine, a bunch of big newspapers. All that's interesting, but it should tell you that they're going to win because it appeared in Sports Illustrated, right? Sports Illustrated. So lo and behold, if you're getting an environmental conservation effort in Sports Illustrated, okay, that's getting some attention, some national attention, right? So they got a lot of attention, and this is the current, well, it was a few years ago, the Mono Lake Committee's Information Center, and any place that is by a barbecue place is well worth visiting, right? Yeah, here, right. So they gained 20,000 new members. A lot of people noticed that the public seemed to be talking about environmental values and environmental ethics, and there was a survey. And the survey said that the survey showed that consumers were willing to pay between $42 and $94 more per year per household for water in order to save Mono Lake. And by the way, this would way cover the cost, right? So because we think about how many millions of households are in Los Angeles, right? Okay, the LA Department of Water and Power has a huge customer base, so this would way cover any cost, okay? So now basic economics, right? So people who are trying to take a more market-oriented approach would say, hey, if the consumers are willing to pay for it, then there will be a supply, right? That should happen. The LA Department of Water and Power should offer this to the consumers. And did they? The answer is no. Of course they didn't. Why? Because the LA Department of Water and Power had blinders on. They were absolutely convinced that they had these water rights, despite the California Supreme Court decision, that the LA needed this water, and that the old way of doing things was the right way. It was the way that LA was going to continue to do things. So this tells you something about organizational behavior. Okay, and this happens certainly in governmental agencies, but it also, by the way, happens in for-profit organizations. Organizations that are presumably motivated for profit will do things that are ultimately harmful to their bottom line, to their profit, because the human beings running these organizations get this narrow way of thinking, they get this rigid way of thinking, and they cannot see what's really going on, right? And so that's what was happening here. So how's that going to play out? So we're going to find out about that in just a second. That's a couple slides away. So this public engagement becomes really important. One of the things about this is the Mono Lake Committee is engaging with people. They're not lecturing them. They're trying to get people to talk about it. So words like deliberation and public discourse are just big fancy words for conversations and discussions and so forth, right? They focused on equitable, low-income communities of color, underrepresented groups, and developing these relationships between people in special places of ecological significance, and so forth. There's growing political support, and that included a number of what political science is called policy entrepreneurs. So there were a number of elected leaders who decided that they could influence policy and kind of make a name for themselves by championing this, by basically spending their political capital. And, right? Okay, now, politicians have political capital. That means sort of the goodwill and the favors and the support that have been built up over time. And when they spend it, right, they're spending it down. Right? And so, if whoever any senator goes and starts asking other senators to support their bill, then they're spending their political capital. They can only do so much. Right? They only have so much political capital. They can only spend so much. So politicians have to decide what they're going to invest themselves in, what they're going to put themselves out there. And obviously, if it ends up being successful, that sort of replenishes their political capital. Right? It's like, oh wow, that's really awesome. I want to be a part of that. Or I want to be on board with what this leader's doing. So Pete Wilson was a U.S. Senator from California, and then governor, Republican senator, and then Republican governor, became very committed to this, and he played a really significant role, particularly in getting Congress to establish the Mono Basin National Forest Scenic Area in 1984. Okay, now this is when Ronald Reagan was president, and Reagan was not a particularly strong environmentalist, I think would be fair to say. Okay, actually Reagan had done some fairly strong environmental things when he was governor of California. Actually, there is a very strong regulatory entity called the Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. Okay, it is an interstate agency composed of California and Nevada and the federal government to try to protect Lake Tahoe from too much development that was causing runoff in Lake Tahoe. Reagan and his friend Paul Laxalt, who's the governor of Nevada, also a conservative Republican, are the ones who put that deal together and signed it. Okay, so it's a strong land use regulatory entity, and so that but by the time Reagan was president, he was not as enthusiastic about a lot of environmental initiatives, or at least some of them, and so Pete Wilson had to kind of do some work there to get Reagan to get on board with establishing this, but it happened, right? And so that was key. California legislature back in '81 created the Mono Lake Tufa State Reserve. But then a lot of the important action, and by the way, we're going to find out in just a moment that both Wilson and the California legislature played some significant roles in funding. But the other thing that's key is the changes in political leadership in Los Angeles. So Richard Riordan was a new mayor of Los Angeles and said, hey, we've got to save Monterey Lake. One of the leading, Rick Gallanter, one of the leading LA City Council members, was a strong advocate for saving Monterey Lake. Actually, in the election where Riordan was elected, every single candidate for mayor said saving Monterey Lake was a priority. Now just think about this, right? Monterey Lake's way up in the other part of the state. It's weird, right? You got this tufa and this shiny stuff and this birds and everyone wants water, right? And so that's a significant development politically, right? It's a significant development politically. So a big part of the political support was providing money for the solution. Okay, so in 1989, there's state legislation conditionally set aside $60 million to help pay for substitute supply of water for LA. In 1992, at the federal level, Congress authorized federal funds for the recovery of 120,000 acre-feet of water to offset reduced diversions from Monterey Lake. And now, Pete Wilson, by 94-95, has left the U.S. Senate, is now governor of California, and promised that there would be $20 million in funds to LA aid water conservation. Despite this, okay, that's a lot of money, right? I mean, I could use 100 million or so, right? And I could do a lot of things with that. But despite that, the LA Department of Water and Power refused to accept the money. Okay, again, economically irrational, but explained by that the sort of the politics and sort of human stubbornness that can come by seeing things just very narrowly. So one of the things it says is all environmental issues are political issues, regardless of whether they're framed as legal issues. Okay, every single issue that we have studied in class all semester, or that we will study, has legal dimensions. Otherwise, we wouldn't be studying it in class, right? But every single one of them is a political issue. There's no getting around it. It's a choice about public values in how we're going to make resource trade-offs and resource decisions. And so that also tells us that the lack of political support will undermine any advancements made in environmental conservation. Okay? And lack of political support. And that political forces and timing is important. Policy entrepreneurs are important. People who step forward, who have political capital, and will spend it on an issue. Resources in engagement of the public, participation of the public. Okay? So again, the LA Department of Water and Power ignored the Monterey Lake Committee, but something happened, and all sorts of very distinctive events can have major impacts in the direction of history, right? Okay. So in 1988, David Gaines was killed in a tragic car accident, and so then they needed somebody to take over his leadership of the Monterey Lake Committee, and they had this Yale-trained expert in problem solving and collaboration named Martha Davis, and so she became the executive director of the Monterey Lake Committee, and that was important because she said, hey, we need to work on collaborative problem solving. Now David Gaines had said all along that his goal, he wanted to save Monterey Lake, but even more importantly than that, he wanted the public to make an informed decision. He said, if the public knew all the adverse impacts of taking the water from Monterey Lake and using it in LA, and they knew that, and they were aware of it, and they still chose to use the water, he wouldn't like it, but he would be okay with the decision. But what he wanted was for the public to make an informed decision. So one of the things that says is, again, it's not this, he was not trying to foist a particular decision on the public. He wasn't saying, you gotta do this, or you're bad, you're evil, you're wrong. He's like, hey, understand what you're gonna lose if we lose Monterey Lake. And so that's a different approach. Martha Davis comes along, and she takes it to the next step, and she says, there is no way that we're going to get through this and we're going to reach a happy ending unless we figure out how LA can meet its water needs. Okay, bumper stickers are great, money from the government is great, political support is great, but the bottom line is LA is a growing area, and if we don't figure out some sort of way that LA can meet its water needs, they're just never going to give up the fight, right? There's LA Department of Water and Power is going to keep fighting. So that's so LA Department of Water and Power said, well, if Monterey Lake wins, LA loses. Right? That was their way of looking at it. So she said, the point here is not to say we don't want water for LA. We want to figure out a way that LA can meet its water sources without draining Monterey Lake. And she also said that we also need to make sure that it's not just a substitute supply. So we're going to, so we'll save Monterey Lake, but we'll drain Lake Tahoe or some other environmentally important water source. So what does that do? That leads you to sort of thinking about alternative ways to the LA can meet its water needs. Well, what are they? Let me come back to this slide. Conservation and reclamation. Okay? Conservation and reclamation are the keys. So conservation being reducing the amount of water usage per person, being more efficient, simply using less. So low flush toilets, low flow shower heads, not just pouring clean water onto golf courses or onto all those plants in the shopping mall parking lot that don't necessarily need pristine Monterey Lake water to be watered. Okay? Reclamation is about runoff. It's about wastewater and turning it into water that can be used. So I'm going to come back to this slide just a moment. Let me go back. So one of the things that they had to get around was this slowness of the LA Department of Water and Power to negotiate. And I said, organizations do this. They get entrenched. Organizations become entrenched in a certain way of looking at the world, right? And individuals get entrenched. Psychology tells us that everybody has ways of framing the world, these mental constructs in our mind that are how we look at the world. And we can become very entrenched in them, and we can fail to see alternatives that may actually be better for us, maybe better for everybody. And so that was part of what was going on with the Department of Water and Power. We have these litigation victories by Monterey Lake Committee, Department of Water and Power's water rights are in jeopardy, it's persistent activism, shifting public opinion, available funding. So one of the things that starts happening is the mayor and the city council start knocking heads together. So they just plain replaced commissioners of the Department of Water and Power and the general manager. They're like, okay, you guys are going to be resistant and stubborn, that's not working for us politically anymore. Goodbye. Thank you for your service. We're moving on. Okay? So that happens. Then some of those elected officials get involved in helping try to broker negotiations between LA and the Monterey Lake Committee, and finally in December of '93 they reach an agreement. So that agreement includes conservation and reclamation efforts using the state and federal funds. They built a $50 million water reclamation plant. Basically, this is recycling water. They changed their water rates and how they charge for water to encourage conservation. They had a variety of conservation kits and rebates for low-use toilets and appliances, and developed a variety of water recycling projects and goals, including, for example, using on-site wastewater for landscape water. Right, and you see that more and more all the time. It's called gray water, but there's no reason that you couldn't use on-site wastewater for landscape water. Okay, and it happens. So this is some of the ads and stuff about the free toilets and whatnot. Some of that thing, had those in various parades and so forth. So one of the things that was really impressive is that LA ended up reducing its diversions. Remember, it was almost 100,000 acre-feet of water per year. They dropped down to 12,000 acre-feet of water. Okay, so it's almost a 90% reduction. Right, and that's big. That's big. Right. They set a target lake level, and once the lake level reached the target of 6,392 feet, then LA can start taking some more water again, can increase its diversion. Feeder stream flows are being restored. There are some flows that are restored, some are still in the process of being restored, and also the ecosystem, especially the riparian ecosystems, have been restored. The islands are now islands again. Okay, they're no longer connected to the mainland, except during times of significant drought. That still happens, but very significant drought. The Water Board issued a decision incorporating all this into into basically a revision or modification of LA's water rights. It's called Water Board Decision 1631. So it became adopted officially as a Water Board decision, and so forth. There were some predictions about how long it would take. Those have not turned out to be true. And I should update this, but I've been giving this presentation for a long time, so I have an old statistic. It's actually gone up and down because California went through a significant drought. Okay, so it had really risen a lot. The lake level risen a lot, even more than the 10.1 feet decision, 10.1 feet since from 1994 to 2007. But it dropped again, and then now it's back up. Okay, so basically the flows are in the feeder streams are much improved, and there are a variety of riparian restoration activities that are either underway or have been completed. Significantly, Southern Californians changed their water usage. So LA between 75 and 95 added 1 million people, 1 million new customers, and yet the total water consumption in California did not change. Okay, that's significant. And they've continued to work on conservation and reclamation strategies, and they've sort of shifted how they think about their water and their water rights and so forth. And the Monterey Committee has become involved in other issues. One of the things I do want to mention is, by the way, this has an interesting effect here. The Louisville Water Company has a problem in that they have more customers now. They have more customers every year, but the actual amount of water they're selling has dropped. And the reason is because any water, like shower heads, toilets, appliances, etc., for the past, I don't know, at least decade or more, are low usage, high conservation, low usage, because nationally that's just that's all there is anymore, right? That these kind of efforts, and not just here, but Las Vegas and Arizona and throughout the West, but these sort of conservation efforts have driven the national standards towards more water conservation. Well, that's important out west, but actually here it becomes an issue about whether they actually can sell enough water to meet their costs. And so what's happened is it has actually meant the Louisville Water Company is now supply Fort Knox, they've supplied Bullitt County, I think they've got something going on, or trying to go on with Shelby County, and so on and so forth. So they've expanded their service area. Some of that involves supplying water to other local water departments who then supply it to the customers. So it's not like all those people are directly Louisville's customers, but the water's being sold there. And in some ways, it's actually had a really good result because Louisville Water Company is very well managed, and our water is really good. It's really relatively clean, you're among the very best in the nation in terms of our drinking water. And so it has meant that we're actually we're sort of exporting Louisville and part of what we are to the other areas in our region. So that's kind of interesting. But this kind of stuff is part of what has contributed to that kind of development here. So you just never know where the ripple effects are going to be. Okay, so there's some pretty pictures of all this and so forth. And so there's some various issues. There's ongoing issues about restoration efforts. There's ongoing land development pressures around Mono Lake, issues about funding and staffing, and of course climate change and drought. And so, well, what this says overall, and what you should be thinking about for every single one of the problems that we're working on in class, is all of those non-legal factors that you have to consider with your legal analysis. Your legal analysis, but what are the politics of this? How can you engage in multi-stakeholder collaboration? How can you engage and educate the public? Place-based kind of connections that people have, funding and resources, those kinds of things, right? So just to think about that, the issues we're dealing with are not going to be solved just by a judicial decision, just by a statute, just by a regulation. Those are important. The cases are important. The statutes are important. The regulations are important. But the issues are much broader. The problems are much broader. You have to think about the non-legal. Okay, questions? Okay. All right. So we're done with that. Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that is clear from this is that environmental issues involve much more than the government, much more than lawyers, much more than scientists. And so when we're talking about grassland conservation and prairie dog conservation, private property owners are key, okay? And the private sector is key. So right now I'm going to focus on private sector actors. So private sector actors. And I'm going to talk about two broad categories. So businesses, industries, other resource users and polluters, and private property owners. So we might be thinking, for example, about a company that creates rodenticides, basically chemicals that can be used to poison the prairie dogs, right? And so that's a business, an industry that is going to affect our grasslands and our prairie dogs and so forth. But we're not really talking about that company as a owner of private property, owner of land, right? And I really, by this I really mean land, or land and water, certainly owners. Okay? You can imagine somebody who has built a house on 10 acres out in Utah, and it's their home, and they don't like those prairie dogs, they don't like those native grasses, they want to mow down the native grasses, dig them up, and replace them with something, some Asian, what they think is pretty landscaping, but it's not native to the areas. Where we bring all those in Andina or something like that, right? You're going to bring that in and plant it and so forth. So that's and they don't like the prairie dogs, so they want to shoot them, they want to poison them and so forth. On their land, that's really their home. They're not a business, they're not an industry, they're a private property, right? Yeah? So then we can think about the rancher or the farmer. They fall into both categories, right? Does everybody see where I'm coming from on that? So when we talk about the private sector, sometimes we can kind of get one model going in our mind, right? One way of thinking. But what I'm talking about is there's a range of private sector actors that are affecting grasslands and affecting prairie dogs, and that need to be involved in the conservation effort. And if they're not, in one way or the other, then we're not going to achieve conservation. Why? Because the vast bulk, more than 80% of the habitat of prairie dogs, and I think the numbers for the grasslands is even more, even larger than 80%, but certainly, just kind of off the top of my head, well more than 80% of the resources we're talking about, the systems we're talking about, are in private ownership, or private management, or private control. So we talked previously about what federal agencies can do on federal lands. They can do some significant things, but the bulk of what we're talking about here is really on private land. And so if we don't somehow get private owners involved, then we're going to have a problem. Okay, so one possibility is just regulation of private activity, right? So one thing that we've already studied is the ESA. If a species is listed as threatened or endangered, then any person or entity cannot take that species, cannot harm, harass, kill, shoot, wound, trap, etc. That species, that critter, without getting a permit, incidental take permit, doing habitat conservation plan, and so forth. Okay. So far, which species of prairie dog is listed? Utah. And the Utah prairie dog is the only one of the 5 species that are in the United States that is federally protected. However, all of the others have at one point or another been considered for listing, and there are periodic and repeated efforts to get the federal government to list those species. Okay. Right? And so what we get then in response is, okay, listed, and then line take prohibition, and permits, take permits and HCPs, okay? So if it's listed, we're down that road. What we get in terms of private activity for the remaining 4 species is what? Opposition to listing, right? How many private actors in the Great Plains or near Rocky Mountain West do you think support the listing of any of those 4 other species? Not very many, right? It's not 0, right? But it's not very many. There's a lot of private opposition to listing species, which is, goes back to the politics of what we're talking about, how difficult it is to protect these species because it's very politically unpopular by those companies and property owners who then would be regulated. Okay. Now, in order to avoid listing these species, in other words, in order to avoid getting to the point where the evidence shows that the agency has to list the species because it's in danger of going extinct, what do the agency and the property owners do together? What do they create? Remember? Canada conservation agreements with assurances, and other kinds of regional plans. So basically to engage in some sort of cooperative conservation and recovery effort. Cooperative conservation and recovery efforts between the private sector, state and local governments, and by the way, state and local governments in this part of the country are going to be pretty sensitive to the local opposition, right? Okay, they may be more on board with conservation, but they're not going to want the prairie dogs to be listed because that's very politically unpopular. So you get the private parties, you get state and local governments, you get the federal agencies to engage in some efforts to conserve the habitat, to conserve the grasslands, to conserve the species, so that we don't get to the point where it needs to be listed, right? That's the idea behind it. Now, whether that works or not is a matter of a lot of controversy, a lot of disagreement. A lot of that depends on your perception about how much conservation is needed and whether private parties really behave in environmentally responsible ways, right? Okay, so people who are more prone to say, hey, agreements, collaboration, private action is better than government regulation are more prone to think that these work. People who are like, the only answer is government regulation because nobody does what they should unless somebody makes them, right? They're more prone to say these don't work. Does everybody see that? I mean, and I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just saying that where you come out on that kind of issue often tells, shapes whether you think these work or don't. Okay, so that's that's an issue. So regulation has, for the most part, then reached a lot of obstacles and roadblocks. Okay, so on the opposite end of the spectrum is purely voluntary, environmentally responsible behavior. Okay, purely voluntary, environmentally responsible behavior. And I mean, I think it would be fair to say that almost everybody who deals, it's not true that everybody, but almost everybody who deals with these issues wants to encourage environmentally responsible behavior. I mean, yes, there are people who are like, I want to do whatever I want with the environment. Who cares about prairie dogs? Who cares about grasslands? Okay, there are people who are like, I have the freedom to be responsible environmentally, and I want to be so that, yes, that's out there. But for the most part, in the conversations that we have about environmental law and environmental policy, everybody's pretty much on the same page of, hey, we want to encourage environmentally responsible behavior. There's a lot of disagreement about what does that, what counts, who does it, etc. Right? Okay, I'm sorry. Obviously, I'm a little dyslexic there. Okay. So again, there are going to be folks who say, this is never going to happen. Nobody is going to engage in environmentally responsible behavior unless they have to. And yet, there is evidence of private parties that engage in pretty environmentally responsible behavior on their own. And the question is why? Okay? Well, with companies, we see that there has been this trend towards adoption of environmental standards for how the businesses operate, in part because consumers like them. It is partly a marketing strategy. It's also in part because a growing number of executives in these companies are people who just kind of care about the environment, right? They don't want their kids to grow up in some sort of toxic wasteland, right? And they're people too. They have kids too. I mean, it's not all just sort of profit machinery. And so we see evidence of that. We see, and that was in one of the readings earlier. Right? There's Walmart, what they're doing, and so on and so forth. There is the potential that some of this is actually not much action. It's a lot of hype. That's what's called greenwashing. Greenwashing is the sort of where the company says, hey, we're doing all these amazing things, but in reality, it's not that amazing. It's not having that much effect. They're just trying to get credit. Okay, so that happens. And